Mayor, I think we're just waiting for a couple more board members to get online before we begin.
Why don't we go ahead and do the housekeeping?
Thank you for participating in today's meeting. Please do not connect to Zoom or teleconference while in the room, and please silence all devices. Click on the globe at the bottom of your screen to select either English or Spanish. Public comment will be taken after each item. If you are in the auditorium and wish to comment, please use the iPads located in the lobby. For meetings in other locations, please complete a blue speaker card and provide it to a South Coast AQMD employee. Speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes or less for all agenda items, and times may be shortened to ensure all speakers can be heard. A countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. More time will be allotted for Spanish translation that is not simultaneous. For questions or issues on public comment, please call the public advisor at 909-396-3247. That's 909-396-3247. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being removed from the meeting. Be aware that this meeting is being recorded. By participating, you are authorizing recording of audio and visual content presented during the live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD.
I'd like to call to order the Stationary Source Committee meeting for the month of May and ask for roll call.
Councilmember Caccioti,
Here.
Senator Delgado, absent. Supervisor Mitchell, absent. Padilla, Board Member Padilla Campos, absent. Mayor Solace,
Present.
Chair McKellen.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum?
Do we have a quorum?
Yes.
Very good. Let's go on to item number 1, an update on the proposed amended rule 1146.2 presented by Heather Farr, our planning and rules manager. Heather.
Good morning, Committee Chair McAllen, members of the committee. I'm here to provide the third update on proposed amended rule 1146.2. Okay. Do we have the slides? I do. Okay. Just for background, this rule was adopted in 1998. It does regulate NOx emissions from those large water heaters, as well as small process heaters and boilers. This rule really is implemented through the supply chain, so through the manufacturers, distributors, installers, retailers. This proposal is needed. It will implement a control measure in the 2022 AQMD, and it really is critical for achieving our air quality goals. As I mentioned, this is our third time presenting to the committee. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So we did present at the April committee and had some stakeholder concerns. Those concerns included the small businesses, such as dry cleaners, as well as concerns about the availability and cost for those units. We also received comments about the pace of the regulation, with the environmental stakeholders wanting us to move forward to set those signals, where the industry stakeholders really wanted us to take some time to have further discussions, conduct more site visits. So the committee did suggest that we come back today to provide an update and continue to work with the stakeholders. So the next slide, we, through this whole process, we've done many site visits, from dry cleaners to restaurants to multifamily buildings. We visited places that have already installed zero emission units to talk about kind of their challenges and their experiences. And then we've also gone to places that have concerns about installing these zero emission technologies to have those conversations.
Could I ask a question? Do we have an idea of how many of each kind that we visited?
How many of each one of these facilities that we visited? We have visited about 4 multifamily buildings, 2 restaurants, a hotel.
Yeah, probably from like 1 to 4 for each of those categories. Yeah.
And there's quite a variety of facilities out there that do operate these types of units. Altogether, there are more than 1 million units, so there are a lot of different applications of these types of units. Okay, next slide, please. So since this April board meeting, we have, again, continued these site visits. We're working on 6 additional site visits. We did 2 commercial kitchens, 2 multi-family buildings last week. We're doing 2 more next week, and we are in the process of trying to schedule additional meetings as well. We're also trying to do more outreach and get the word out to discuss this with different organizations. We met with the Building Owners and Managers Association last week, and next week we're going to present to a hospital association, just really trying to educate about these proposed upcoming limits. Next slide, please. We do have some key takeaways from the site visits. One of the concerns that we've heard is that there are space constraints. These zero-emission units are larger, can have a larger footprint. But what we found that most of the sites we've seen do have sufficient space. And we do have long timelines to allow for that proper design and construction. We also, after our site visits, did include an additional provision that will allow for additional time if you do need to have to do some building construction to make room for that unit or possibly have to relocate that unit. Another concern is the cost. There are more high upfront costs for these units, as well as potential installation and upgrade costs. But we did allow for long timelines, and those timelines will allow for those costs to come down over time. There's also a lot of funding available right now, specifically trying to encourage the adoption of zero-emission technologies. And when we look at the utility savings over the lifetime of that unit, we do find that there are cost savings there. Another concern is about power availability. And again, it's those long timelines that we think will build in enough time for the grid reliability and supply that will be needed for this role. Next slide, please. We do have 3 key issues we would like to highlight. The first is, again, that impacts on the small businesses. We did incorporate several provisions to address this. The first one I want to highlight is those units will be allowed to be replaced at their natural replacement. There's no requirement for them to be replaced early. We also included alternative compliance options that will allow a delay for the implementation of that zero-emission technology. Included in that is time for, if utility upgrades are needed, we did increase that to 4 years from our original approach of 3 years. Allowing more time if there's multiple units. We do allow a time for a temporary unit if you have an emergency replacement, which has been a concern. And again, that new provision to allow for construction if you have a limited space. We know some of our local small businesses are space constrained, so we wanted to allow more time if you have to do construction. And also properties under lease. Many of our small businesses are lessees as well, so providing more time if you are a property under lease that needs more time for those upgrades. And if you're a very small business, we have a small use exemption to allow you to continue to operate your existing unit, as well as numerous incentives that are available, including the rebate program that we ourselves are working on, which will have an element for small businesses. Next slide, please.
When we say more time, if it's going to ask, how much time do we give these small businesses?
So again, depending on which of the alternative compliance option that you're looking for, that utility upgrade was 4 years. If you're a leasee, that was a different additional 2 years. We're considering having an 18 months if you have to increase for construction space. So it depends on which compliance option you're referencing.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, this is the second one, the one before this, thank you. Another concern is the availability of these zero-emission technologies, but really our compliance schedule was built kind of to address this. We do have long schedules before they come into effect, but we do feel like we need to set those market signals early, so you get that certainty that these lower emission limits are coming, so that the manufacturers can produce the technologies to meet these needs. And when we developed those schedules, we did work with the manufacturers to come up with a schedule that is something that they can work with. We also included a staggered implementation.
Excuse me, when you said that, what about boilers for dry cleaners? I don't know, I understand Parker Boiler, who supplies most of the boilers for dry cleaners, isn't even considering this. So when you talk about manufacturers that have agreed to the timeline, I'm interested to know who that is.
Certainly. Well, for those high temperature units, and those are the ones that do need some additional time for that technology to become more commercially available, we are not requiring those until a 2033 date. So we are providing time for those units to kind of further mature. There are examples of high temperature units that are out there that we are aware of, but we do acknowledge that we need a little bit more time for those. So again, as far as the availability of this technology and the demand that will be created, we do have a staggered schedule because they're not required to be installed until those units naturally need to be replaced. And then we have an earlier implementation date for where that technology is really more widely available. So again, those are not the high temperature units. And for the high temperature units, we have those later implementation dates, and then we have that technology check-in. So we can continue to monitor the technology. We will report back to this board by January 1st, 2028. That's before those implementations go into effect, so that we can really be sure that that technology is ready.
Well, January 1, 2028, I'd like to see that date, if this rule goes into effect, move back at least 6 months so I can participate. I have no idea January 1, 2028, if I will be reelected or reappointed to this board. So I would like to participate in that technology review, whatever it is.
Okay. So the last key issue that we just wanted to discuss today is that high cost. And we do acknowledge that there will be a high cost associated with this rule, but we're also achieving substantial emission reductions with big impact on public health. We are projected to get a 5.6 ton per day NOx reduction. And a lot of the reason that we're getting so much reduction and that there's so much cost is there's just a lot of units out there with more than 1 million units. But we do need these emission reductions to fulfill the AQMD and to reach our air quality goals. And again, some of the ways that we're trying to mitigate that high cost is not to require them to transition to zero until they're doing the replacement. So it's really just the incremental cost between the unit they would have had to purchase and the zero emission technology. And, those cost savings for the fuel over the lifetime of the equipment will help offset that, as well as some of the incentive programs that are available. And all the categories that we evaluated, other than one, were below the cost screening threshold from the AQMP. And it's those high temperature type 1 units that exceeded that threshold. But we're really trying to address that by having that long implementation time before those have to meet the limit. And again, that check-in will give us that extra certainty. And again, significant funding out there available for the transition to zero emission technologies right now. Okay, next slide. Okay, so for the next steps, we do intend to bring this for board consideration on June 7th, as well as a technology assessment, I'm going to say July 1st, 2027, to allow time to talk about how that technology has progressed. June.
Very good. Comments, questions from committee members? I have a few. In your site visits to like the dry cleaners, have you looked at the electric load on some of these facilities and what would need to be done to potentially upgrade them to handle the significant increase in current that's going to be required for any system that produces steam?
Right. We did note when we went to the site visits that dry cleaners do typically already have a higher amperage panel for their units. We do understand that there will likely have to be upgrades in order to accommodate electric boilers or heat pump boilers. So we do know that that's going to take some time, which is why we have in some additional time added in to allow for utility upgrades, or if you're a leasee, to have the property owner upgrade those.
And when you talk about potential construction to allow these things to fit, like I've said before, most dry cleaners are in strip mall, shopping centers. And since they pay the highest rent of anybody in a strip mall or shopping center, they usually take the minimum space that they need to do the job. So boiler rooms right now tend to fit the boiler in it and nothing else. So if the new technology exceeds those boiler rooms, they're not going to be constructing anything larger. And the landlord will eventually get rid of them because they tend to not like dry cleaners anyway. So I'm very concerned about the technology, the size that it's going to be. Will it fit into the existing footprint that the cleaners have? The electricity that's going to be required, the amount, and whether panels are going to have to be upgraded and who's going to pay for that, and how is that going to be done with the landlords to get that done? Landlords are pretty tough people to deal with. They really dictate the terms, and if you're an annoyance, they'll just get rid of you. So that's one of my concerns for the dry cleaning industry. The boiler there has to work 4, 5, 6, 7 hours at a stretch, producing steam all of that time. It's not an on-off thing like water heaters or things like that. So it will draw considerable current over a long period of time. Those are the concerns I have. And I know the building industry and apartment owners and so on are concerned about weight. If putting new technology on the roofs, whether the roofs can take that additional weight, and is that something we've been looking at? And how that fits into the building codes and so on that cities and the state were going to have.
Right. So, we have gone out to several site visits and had that concern raised before, which is why we did add in that extra time if they do need to relocate their units. If they needed to put them up on the roof, we are allowing more time in the compliance schedule for them to do that work.
And I would also add that we had originally come out and proposed, first it was 6 months to a year or so for the construction. And actually in response to that, because they brought up about relocation and need for additional time, they asked for 18 months, and we're going to be providing that.
I know in the recent BizFed letter that a lot of people signed on to, they're concerned about the cost and the fact that they disagree with the cost that the district has come up with for this. You have any comments on that?
We did meet with them to talk about the cost. They have not been able to provide us yet that specific data or the details of that. They said they would be doing that, but on the surface we could see that a lot of the numbers are in the ballparks of the same numbers that we've been seeing and the cost curves. There are some little differences in those. I think, for example, they don't consider fuel savings over time, things like that. So there will be a little bit of that. But I think overall, I think we are seeing those, and we are addressing them again in these long-term implementation timeframes, as well as a whole series, as Heather pointed out, of alternative options for folks to meet those limits and give them the time they need.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we've got Cacciati, Vice Chair Cacciati, go ahead.
Chair McCallum, thank you. Larry, I agree with your report back date of June 1st. That's 3 years from now. That gives us some time for technology to advance, to assess it. I was looking at the BizFed letter, finally got a chance to read it this morning. And just one question for staff on one of the paragraphs talk about, let me read it to you. one of the key takeaways is not planning to create any accommodations for when the compliance with this rule causes a conflict with local zoning or code enforcement. This very real scenario should be considered for inclusion into various off-ramps. Also include the costs associated with retaining a land use attorney to navigate the variance request. So that would probably be when you've got to modify the structure of the building or something like that to accommodate maybe a larger type of footprint. Have we looked at that, Mike or Heather?
Yes, thank you for the inquiry. Yes, this is what goes back to actually the new provision that we're proposing today, because this was in response to that issue. And we asked about those areas where there was a conflict of code, that they could be more specific. They did bring up things like having to take down a wall or expand a wall to
Right.
create space or even relocate. And that's why we're proposing that additional now 18 months when those situations arise.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other comments from committee members? Seeing none, we'll go to public comment at this time. We have 5 speakers lined up, 6, maybe 7.
All right.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. No commenters in the auditorium at this time, but let's go to our Zoom comments. First commenter is Sasan Rahimzadeh.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Sasan Rahimzadeh. I'm calling on behalf of the California Cleaners Association. I also own and operate my own dry cleaners here. And one of the concerns that we have, first, I really do want to thank the staff for meeting with us over the last few months. And frankly, I don't want to at all seem unappreciative of all the modifications that has been made. However, frankly, to your point, Chair, the biggest concern for myself, being one of those people, as a tenant in a shopping center, frankly, the ideas that and in small, nothing major conversations that I've had with our landlord, they simply, time extended time on it, frankly, still does not change the circumstance in the fact that those costs of the retrofit, forgetting the cost of the purchase of the boiler, forgetting the operating costs, allowment, let's say all of those things being a given, but the cost of the retrofit, time allowance alone doesn't change any of that. And the landlords, especially in the cases, specifically to the point that you said, when those leases do come up for renewal, they absolutely, we are 100% at their mercy, and it would only make sense for them to not want to take on a big challenge with a particular dry cleaning operation versus any other tenant that would not have those requirements. So it would be absolutely detrimental for us, regardless of the timeline, whether it's 6 months, 2 years, 5 years. We'd have to do those things, and the property owners simply wouldn't want to do that, even if my own spaces lease comes up, and one of our spaces comes up in 2026. They may simply not want to renew us, because if they know that during that lease term, we'll have to do those upgrades. So I don't know really how to propose what other changes can be proposed, other than, I just don't know how this could be, unless the technology can be drastically changed coming up by 2027, where existing infrastructure can be used to implement this, then by all means, we wouldn't, but if the technology cannot be improved to the point where implementation of it becomes a substantial major project for tenants, where we are simply reliant on a landlord to allow us to use that, timeline wouldn't matter. It would simply be impossible to do at any point. So again,
Thank you for your comments. Would you close the queue now and go on to our next speaker?
All right. Our next commenter is Harvey Eder.
Go ahead, Harvey.
Good morning. Am I being heard?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. My name's Harvey Eder. I'm talking for the Public Solar Power Coalition and for myself. 1 million units. Okay, we're talking 1146, right?
That's
I
correct.
came in through. Okay, thank you. Okay. I don't know what the definition of the high temperature is, but I know like for power plants and stuff, it's with 1,000 PSI, 550 degrees F. Anyway, but in 1979 and in 1982, the district's plans included solar energy. All right, that's 45 years ago. We brought this up and we've been bringing it up for 30, 40 years.
Mr. Eder, please focus your comments on this agenda item.
We're talking about the technologies involved here. All right. Solar is a major technology, can produce steam. And that's a technology that's been ignored. And it was developed by the Israelis right here in Southern California, the largest thermal power plants in the world, 350 megawatts built in the desert here in Daggett, right next to Solar One, the power tower that DOE put up. And they put it up for $12 a watt. The Israelis came in, $3.50, $4 a watt, and then build, these are line focused concentrators. They build 80s and 30s and they've been operating for 40 years now. Okay, PVs, they say, will degrade at 20 years. You got to rebuild them. One thing they're saying, there's one guy saying that they are not renewable. A chicken's renewable, a tree's renewable. You got to rebuild solar. It's not. Okay, these plants have operated and their efficiency is 33% versus 22 for PVs. They got 50% more energy and they've lasted over twice as long. And this has got the new book that came out. This guy Perlin, he did 2,500-year history in 80 of solar, and he has a new one out that's a 6,000-year Let It Shine. Now they omitted anything about the Israelis building these plants down here, which is really outrageous. It's being rewritten. I don't know what's. I'm trying to get a hold of Jacobson out of Stanford, who wrote the foreword on this. It was quoted by Financial Times, and Perlin that I've known for 45 years. This technology is being ignored. And right here, when you talk about making steam on site, there's an application. And we have to look at, you're talking about tearing down walls and redoing things. We can build pipelines for steam, and we can store it, and we can do it. They're doing 52 houses, Drake Landing and Saskatchewan. It goes 100% heating all year long, taking flat plate collectors on the roofs and storing it, heating up the ground underneath. It's been going on for 20 years, man. It's cost effective.
Thank you, Harvey.
Our next commenter is Mike Leeming.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity. Mr. McCallum, listening to you, you have a lot of common sense and a lot of knowledge, I think, out of everybody in the group. So I appreciate your comments. So the high temperature unit is a unit over 190 degrees Fahrenheit, which we're talking about. Steam boilers and dry cleaners are just one of thousands of industries that use high temperature hot water and steam. And you're right. One of the examples, heat pump technology is not there yet to produce steam. So we're talking about electric resistance boilers. So one of the sites the AQMD visited was Milton Edie's Dry Cleaners in Burbank. Burbank generates their own power with natural gas and coal, and they're tapped out. There's no more power available. So they would have to import power in order to enable that particular dry cleaner who services the movie industry. He's not moving anywhere. He's conveniently located right near the Burbank studios. And so for him, it's $10,000 to study it, about $200,000 to $300,000 to bring the infrastructure to his building, and then maybe another $200,000 to upgrade the panels in his building. And then the electric resistance boiler will cost 3.2 times more to operate. So his $11,000 gas bill will be about $40,000. So that's just one example of what we're seeing. Even in our own building at Parker Boiler Company, the heat pump to replace our space heating gas boiler is $91,000. It's 13 feet long. It won't fit in the boiler room. So we have to put it on the roof and do structural calcs. A turnkey project is $154,000. So yeah, we're just wondering where all this power is going to come from if heat pump technology does not emerge, and I just don't see it getting there. Solar seems like a great idea. These thermal plants work great. If the energy comes from there, then you're not wasting this. To produce electricity remotely takes 68% more therms than it would be locally. So that's a carbon footprint on our planet that doesn't help. It helps the district because it's not coming from here, but it doesn't help the planet. So yeah, Parker boiler at this time, we haven't pursued heat pumps. We probably just buy a company that already makes them and just reverse engineer it from there.
Thank you for your comments, Mike.
Our next commenter is Chris Chavez.
Yes, good morning, board members. This is Chris Chavez, Coalition for Clean Air. I just wanted to say our support for the proposed rule, make sure that it is on track for passage, on-time passage. The 2022 Air Quality Management Plan really doubled down and emphasized the importance of building decarbonization, both in the perspective of buildings, but also in operation. And this is really important for California, Southern California's air quality. This region, as we all know, is an extreme non-attainment for ozone, NOx being one of the primary drivers of ozone pollution in this region, and generally speaking. But certainly we want to make sure that we are supporting Rule 1146.2, and that, again, that the board continues on in getting this rule forward, passing a strong rule, and really making good on the promises of the Air Quality Management Plan that was passed earlier in 2022 or 2023. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for your comments. I see people trying to get on to the queue. I close the queue. Last speaker will be Kim. So,
yeah, I did want to bring up that Adrian Martinez was at the top and there was a blip that brought him down. He came in before the queue was closed, but we can end it after Adrian.
Okay, thank you.
Our next commenter is Monica Embry.
Good morning. My name is Monica Embry, and I'm here with Industrious Labs in strong support of the rule and no further delay. I want to really thank staff for their extensive work on this rule to meet with stakeholders who have raised concerns and ensure that those are properly addressed. And ultimately, we know that justice delayed is justice denied. Board has already delayed this rule for 9 months from its original projected date of September 2023. And these delays have really serious consequences for the public health by allowing polluting equipment to continue to poison our air and to make our communities more sick. Those health impacts include reasons like my nephew, who missed school this week because of his asthma, and my aunt, who recently suffered from a heart attack, and the millions of residents in our South Coast Basin who deserve access to healthy, clean air. These are really common sense and important regulations to move forward that the South Coast Air Quality Management must do in order to be compliant with the 2022 Air Quality Management Plan, but also because of the impacts on our communities and on our health. These are really important steps that we must take to significantly reduce pollution burden, especially on those communities who are facing the most impacts, those who are the least amount of opportunity to deal with these. And we really do encourage the continued regulation to move forward and hope for successful passage at the June board meeting. Last, I do want to say, as a small business owner and daughter of small business owners, definitely understand the concerns that have been raised around those, and encourage for the South Coast Air Quality Management District's Technology Advancement Team to look at securing the funding and incentive programs to help advance the zero emission technologies and equipment available for this sector. There is a huge amount of state and federal funding that is currently available to advance zero emission technologies, and we are in full support of developing the programs and incentives necessary to help businesses make this transition, as is a necessary one for our community's health and to be an attainment. Thanks so much for your consideration and support.
Thank you for your comments.
Next commenter is Bill Pierce. Bill, go ahead.
Oh, good morning, Bill Pierce, the Boeing Company. I just had one specific comment today with respect to the with utility upgrades and the off ramps that the district has proposed in the rule, and I guess our concern is the time frames. I mean, if the utility comes back and says a utility upgrade for our major facilities is going to take 4, 5, 6 years, we're not sure why that type of extension can be allowed under the rule instead of potentially forcing a company to have to go to the hearing board if we've exhausted our extensions under the rule. I mean, we are basically at the mercy of the utility as to whether they can complete major facility upgrades for our substations. And so that was just a comment we've made to the district before. And so we just wanted to touch base on this issue again. And we do appreciate the meetings that staff has had with Boeing and the comments that they've entertained. So, but just wanted to bring that up. We just not sure that the current timeframes in the proposed amendments will allow adequate time considering all the facilities that will need to go through this process. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next commenter in the queue is Sarah Wiltfong.
Hi, good morning. Sarah Wiltfong with the Los Angeles County Business Federation. Just want to say a quick thank you to staff. Thank you to responding to our comments previously and also for scheduling the site visits over the last month. I know they've been helpful, and in talking to our members, they did really feel like the AQMD staff who visited their sites were really trying to find a solution and trying to understand how their businesses operate so that a good rule could be put in place. I'm still going to push for a potential delay in adoption, at least until August. As was mentioned previously, there is a report that's coming out that's separate than the report that the AQMD came up with that's going to talk about the costs associated with switching out these natural gas water heaters and boilers that we do think is going to be a little different and higher than what the district has proposed. And because of that, we think it's prudent for the district to hold off to see when that report comes out. So at least we can kind of compare notes and make sure that the board is adopting an accurate rule. But besides that, I know some of the concerns have already been laid out with the costs associated with this rule, the feasibility of transitioning some of these units into some of these buildings. It's going to be very hard for some businesses to comply with, and hoping that advancements in technology comes out, but we're not entirely sure that that's going to happen. So thanks again for also the 2028 check-in. I think that is going to be really important. But still, as it stands, there is still definitely concern from our membership as to whether or not these are realistic timelines and if it still is going to be feasible. But regardless, I do just want to add, definitely grateful for staff. We do really think that they have tried to meet industry and have tried to amend the rule as such. So just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you, Sarah, for your comments.
Next commenter is Jed Holzman.
Thank you so much, Chair McAllen and members. Jed Holzman from RMI. We are an international nonprofit focused on accelerating the energy transition and ensuring a prosperous and safe future for all. I just wanted to strongly support moving forward on this rule on June 7th. Really want to highlight, as everyone from both sides has done, the work that your staff has done. All of the provisions that were presented to you on slide 7 have been added based on industry requests, right? None of those were part of the original proposal. I would add that most of those accommodations have been made after the end of the year-long public engagement working group process. And indeed, the rule timelines, which were presented at previous stationary source committee meetings, have already been moved back based on manufacturer and industry feedback. So we do believe that your staff has done a very solicitous job of taking in and addressing feedback from the regulated community, and the time to observe the 2022 AQMP is now. Based on a slide from your April Stationary Source Committee meeting, even starting to transition these units to zero emission alternatives on this pace means that the district will have fossil fuel units operating until at least 2058. So that was presented in your last meeting. Obviously, in terms of both attainment dates and our collective climate goals, we would like to not have fossil fuel units operating until 2060. And so just to highlight that while this may seem quick from the status quo perspective, we are in many cases behind the curve and still really need to move as expeditiously as possible to reduce emissions and improve public health in the region. For that reason, we are in strong support and look forward to the rules adoption and implementation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jed, for your comments.
Next commenter is Kim Orbe.
Hi, good morning, staff and board members. My name is Kimberly Orbe, and I'm calling on behalf of the Sierra Club. Again, also very thankful for staff for all the working group meetings that they've been hosting. I've participated in almost all of them, and for them making the time to meet with folks and bring forth a strong rule. This rule is huge. This is going to, I just want to remind us that this is going to benefit. I'm hearing, a lot of concerns, but the actual thing here is that it's going to benefit over 17 million people in the region. We need this rule to pass as identified in the 2022 AQMP plan to avoid any future further harm to the residents in our region for clean air. I'm hearing and I've seen staff really address concerns in the past couple of weeks, and I think staff have done a great job in listening to folks, and I think what we saw today is a good rule. And I also am here to show strong support for this rule, and looking forward to the board and everyone's commitment to passing this rule and to clean up our air, because that's really what this rule is going to do. It's going to really reduce a large amount of emission reductions in our region, which are so necessary and needed at this time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kim, for your comments.
Our last commenter in the Zoom queue is Adrian Martinez.
Good morning, Chair McCallum and members of the committee. My name is Adrian Martinez, and here on behalf of Earth Justice. I am here today to support the rule. I think it's been more than a year, and I think the thing that's most exciting about this regulation is we haven't seen a regulation from the Air District that will achieve this type of emission reduction since 2021. So it's been a while, and this is a reflective of the great work of staff. Anytime you can eliminate 10% of a category's emissions, which is what this does, it eliminates 10% of all of our stationary source emissions. It's a reason for celebration, and it's desperately needed. As you know, we're embarking on smog season right now, which means for many parts of the region, it will be unsafe for people to play outside, unsafe for elderly and folks with respiratory illnesses to go outside and breathe. And we need regulations like this. We need a lot of them to make it safe to breathe. The final thing I want to say is I'd like to support Chair McCallum's recommendation to bump up the technology review 6 months. I think that's a great idea. Appreciated his feedback on this regulation. So I think it would be nice to have it earlier. I also highly suggest that we create more venues for technology check-ins. This committee could be a good venue for it, along the way, and more forums and other things. I think the other key piece of this will bring new technologies to the region. We just heard today that a major company in the region will explore purchasing an industrial heat pump manufacturer or provider. And so I think that's exciting. It's those types of shifts that are needed to implement the 2022 AQMP. Anyway, I'd like to thank staff. I'd like to thank this committee for its diligence on this rule, and we look forward to passing it on June 7th. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian, for your comments. That's the last public speaker on this item. Bring it back to committee for further discussion or comments. Any additional comments or questions? Go ahead, Salache.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perfect timing that Adrian mentioned that technology at the end of his comments. I fully concur with the concept of having folks look into the new technology where we could all be unified and protecting our air quality. So I also join those comments as well. Obviously, we have this in front of us in June. I know there's a request to look at what we do next. So I just want to see what else can staff do to look at some of those timelines. But obviously, we do need to make a decision soon so that we can keep protecting our air quality, but be mindful of how these industries will be affected as well. So I think there's no question that we need to move forward. It's just a matter of making sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's and be sensitive to some of these businesses as well, because I think the part that was said earlier in regards to some of the owners that are in buildings that are not theirs and have to be at the mercy of the landlords, I think that's an area of concern as well. So just again, as we move forward with this, if there's any still opportunity to make any additional amendments, if you want to call it that, to ensure. But again, the timing of moving forward is now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Could we perhaps respond to
Absolutely.
Board Member Salache's suggestions?
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you. Sure. Mike?
Thank you very much. And thank you for the comment. Just a reminder, when it comes, we did hear the stakeholders out there be concerned about the tenants. We totally understand that. And we even got some estimates on those, the activities they need to do. So that's why, again, we have this provision to provide some additional times when they are in those situations by which the tenant, and when talking with them, it's true that they're just not converting that one unit, but a number of those at that time. So they appreciate the additional provisions and the additional time for that. With regards to the concerns with the high heat units that was raised at the dry cleaners, again, we do have long implementation periods. It's a 9-year period on that. We were just talking amongst ourselves about possibly looking into doing a tech demonstration of those high heat units so we can get more empirical data for folks out there to show its feasibility. With regards to Bill Pierce at Boeing and his issue, again, this is one about the utility upgrades and providing additional time. The rule already has two 24-month extensions, so basically 4 years if they need that for those utility upgrades. We can consider an additional another additional period of time as well on that for specific situations, and they can make that request. So we'll look into that. Let's see. And then again, just a reminder, when it comes to technology check-ins, I know folks have been talking about additional site visits, more cost data, all of those things. And of course, we will continue to invite those things because I think that helps build as we kind of move forward to this new deadline for the technology check-in in 2027. It's kind of right on the corner. So we'll continue doing those efforts and taking in that data.
One quick follow-up. Thank you for that response. If I may, Mr. Chair, a quick follow-up. Sure. I know there was also a ask, if I could call it that, during public comment about the appeals board. Is that something that we could still entertain, just so that after we've exhausted everything at this level, is there anything that could still be considered in a case-by-case situation, just so that we're not cookie cutting the whole approach, but just if there's a unique situation where an appeal board can consider that, I think there is some possible room for that opportunity. So I just wanted to voice that possible ask as well.
Want to respond to that, Wayne?
The opportunity to go to the hearing board to appeal remains. So they would definitely have that option.
Okay. Thank you, Wayne, for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Any other comments?
To clarify, that would technically be most likely a petition for a variance that the individual facility would apply for.
All right.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Cacciati, did you have any comments or questions? I guess you said no.
No, they've been heard. Thank you, Larry.
Okay, very good.
And just wanted to confirm there's no in-person public commenters on this item at the remote locations.
There are none.
I'm by myself in the lobby. No one to join me.
Very good. Well, thank you, staff, for your work on this particular item. It's an important item, as pointed out by both of the stakeholders, the environmental community and the business community. So I appreciate all of your efforts in this area. Next, we'll go on to our update on the proposed Rule 317.1 and be presented by Dr. Chung, our Planning and Rules Manager. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair McCallum. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kalam Chung, Planning and Rules Manager. Next slide, please. As a way of background, Federal Clean Air Act under Section 185, it establishes fee requirements for ozone non-attainment area that are classified as either extreme or severe. This requirement applies to major stationary sources of VOCs and NOx, and it kicks in when an area fails to attain. As you can see from the table on the right, for the revoked 1997 standard, the attainment deadline is June of this year. And as we presented in the last committee meeting, for both the South Coast Air Basin and the Coachella Valley, they will not be able to attain this standard by the attainment deadline. So the US EPA could issue a finding of failure to attain as early as the next couple of months. Proposed Rule 317.1, it implements the Section 185 requirements for two ozone standards, the 1997 ozone standard and the 2008 ozone standard. Next slide, please. Proposed Rule 317.1 was presented to the committee last month. We received some public comments and we were directed to return to the committee this month to address the public comments. So we're going to do that in the next couple of slides. Next slide, please. Thank you. For the first comment, commenters request the use of the fee equivalency approach instead of a fee collection approach. Staff did consider this option. However, in order to use the fee equivalency approach, two conditions must be met. The first condition is that the ozone standard has to be revoked. And the second condition is that there are funds that are beyond the commitments in the applicable air quality management plan. The table below summarizes the evaluation. For the older 1979 ozone standard, both conditions were met. And that's why more than 10 years ago, South Coast AQMD adopted Rule 317 to meet this 185 requirements using a fee equivalency approach. Looking at the table in the middle, for the 1997 ozone standard, it is a revoked standard, so the first condition has been met. But there are no funds that are beyond the commitments in the AQMP. As you might recall, for this standard, the applicable AQMP is the 2016 AQMP, which relies very heavily on incentive funding. And it requires about $1 billion per year to achieve the emission reductions committed. Even though there are a lot of efforts to secure more funding, in the last couple of years, the level of funding implemented in South Coast AQMD has been considerably below the $1 billion per year. And in addition, given inflation, this price tag will even be higher in today's dollars. So we do not foresee any funds that could be used above and beyond the AQMP, and that's why the fee equivalency approach is not available for the 1997 standard. And on the right, for the 2008 ozone standard, this standard has not been revoked, and that's why the fee equivalency approach is not available. So under this proposal addressing the two ozone standards, fee collection is the only feasible pathway. Next slide, please. The second commenter requested the payment of the highest fee for a calendar year. For example, if there are 3 ozone standards that are in place and applicable, Instead of paying the fee for each ozone standard, the commenters requested to pay only the highest fee among these three standards. Staff did consider this approach. However, this approach is not consistent with the Federal Clean Air Act. In fact, the US EPA has issued a comment letter, which is available in the public domain, and pointed out that the provision to only pay the highest fee is not approvable. And as such, under 317.1, we are requiring payment for each applicable standard. Next slide. Thank you. Comment number 3 is the request to provide relief for the wastewater industry because they have very limited ability to reduce its throughput or to relocate elsewhere. Additionally, there are also a request to provide relief for facilities with early adoption of clean technologies. Unfortunately, the Clean Air Act is pretty prescriptive. It does not allow for exceptions based on either facility type or technologies type. The Clean Air Act requirements are entirely based on emissions. So our hands are a little bit tied there. However, in terms of the spending of the funds, it will be determined through a public process in the future that will be separate from this rulemaking. But we did receive a lot of great comments and feedback throughout the rulemaking process, such as prioritizing spending for stationary sources or prioritizing spending for environmental justice area. We'll definitely be considering these comments in the future public process when we're deciding how to spend the fund. Next slide.
A comment on that area. I definitely believe the funds ought to be spent in the areas where the fee payer is generating the funds, whether that's in my county or somebody else's county, but definitely impacts the EJ communities which exist both in LA and San Bernardino, Riverside, et cetera. So my opinion in this area is that we need to spend it on mitigating the stationary source impacts and not the mobile source impacts.
Thank you for the comment.
Just my soapbox.
Thank you. Moving on, overall, our team has considered all of the options. However, these options are not feasible for South Coast AQMD for the 1997 or the 2008 ozone standards. For these two standards, fee collection is the only feasible pathway. And as a reminder, if a state or local air authority does not implement Section 185 of the Act, the US EPA is required to step in and collect the funds. And in that case, the fund will leave the district and go into the US Treasury. So our plan is to bring this proposal to the board for consideration on June 7th. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know the LA County Sanitation District has proposed some language in the rule. Could you comment on that?
Yes, we did. We are working on some of that wording that we received, and we're discussing that not only within our legal department and to see where we can take that, but also we're meeting with EPA on Tuesday on that topic.
Very good. So you'll provide some feedback at the June meeting on that area?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Other comments, questions from board committee members? Jose, you're muted. Do you want to speak?
Apologies. No, they're just people walking by in the lobby. Sorry.
You're conversing with other, they don't want to comment on our rule, do they?
But I do have a question now that you call my attention. You asked a question about the sanitation district. Is that what you were asking about this?
I've proposed language that would well, I guess if there's some changes to the go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, just for the angle of that, just for Bay, I'm on the sanitation district as well. So just I'm sure there's a conflict here. Let us know, but I'm on the sanitation district board as well. Just as FYI. Thank you.
Very good. Anybody else?
Chair,
Yes.
I'm not quite sure, but Elisa Coda, I think she might be wanting to say something on behalf of.
This is actually David Rothbard. I'm in Chair Delgado's office, so I'll wait until you do public comment.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thanks.
And seeing no other comments from committee members, we'll ask for public comment. If you get into the queue right now, those who wish to speak.
All right, thank you,
And
Chair.
I'll close the public comment queue at Jane Williams.
Thank you, Chair. We will start with our Montebello location. David Rothbard, go ahead.
Good morning. I'm David Rothbard. I represent the Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts, and I'm also the Air Quality Committee Chair for Clean Water SoCal. We represent the wastewater sector in Southern California. Thank you for the presentation. I just want to, I've said it before, but want to say it again. It's really important for everyone to understand that this penalty in the Clean Air Act assumes that stationary sources are causing non-attainment. This is a really unique situation where in the mobile source committee, it was very clear what was going on in the basin. The mobile sources, federal sources, are the reason we're not attaining the federal standard. So it's really this old remnant of the Clean Air Act that really is not appropriate anymore. I understand it's there. I know we have to deal with it, but it's good for everyone to understand that if you wipe out every single stationary source in the basin, we're still not going to attain. With that said, I have proposed some language that maybe we'll deal with this if there's a broader fix to the problem of EPA not stepping up and controlling their sources. But I also wanted to remind everyone that the rule that we need to implement, I agree with that, but we don't necessarily have to do something that we think EPA is going to automatically rubber stamp. There are other rules out there. San Joaquin has a similar rule. Antelope Valley, San Diego, other air districts have rules that have more flexibility than what we're proposing. In the event EPA says we don't like those provisions, you'll have the opportunity to change your rule. So I just wanted to throw that out there of if there is flexibility the board is amenable to, it does allow EPA the opportunity to review it and provide feedback. If they have concerns, you have an opportunity to change it and address their concerns in the future. So I just want to stop there. Look forward to working with staff. I appreciate them reaching out to me with some language that I proposed, and hopefully we could have that to the board for your consideration next month. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Staff, do you want to respond?
I just want to say we're taking it under consideration. There's a whole host of factors that we'll look at, and we'll provide our recommendation to the board once we've made that determination.
Thank you.
All right, moving over to the Zoom queue. Our first commenter is Chris Chavez.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to state briefly, first of all, it's Chris Chavez, Coalition for Clean Air. Just state briefly that we support the proposed rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Next is Monica Embry.
Good morning, Monica Embry with Industrious Labs again, also here in strong support of the rule, and just to uplift that large polluters, some of the largest and most profitable industries in the world have been given a free pass to pollute. And as the chair mentioned, those disparate impacts have been on environmental justice communities. And so we really welcome this rule as an important step forward, and the fees on large polluters like refineries will be important, not just to be legally compliant under Section 185 of the Clean Air Act, but also to really address the environmental justice issues of the ways that communities living in the shadows of oil and gas infrastructure in our air basin have been under non-compliant federal air quality standards for decades too long. So thank you for staff's leadership, and we look forward to passing this at the board vote in June. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Our next commenter is Steve Jepson.
Hi, this is Steve Jepson, Executive Director for Clean Water SoCal. We represent 80 public water wastewater agencies in Southern California. Many of these essential public service agencies operate Title V facilities impacted by this rule. We've commented on this rule before at Stationary Source and provided detailed written comments. I fully support the comments made by my colleague, David Rothbart, earlier today. We understand that the district must adopt a Section 185 non-attainment fee rule that EPA will approve. We also understand that the major source of emissions driving non-attainment are federal and state sources. So I'll be brief. We hope that the district will consider our sector's comments and the unique predicament of these public facilities already operating under the most stringent air quality rules in the country by crafting language that has some flexibility for public wastewater system ratepayers in the final Rule 317.1 adoption. Finally, I want to assure you that regardless of how this rule ends up being crafted, we will be here for you so you can flush with confidence at the lowest rates possible. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today.
Thank you for your comments.
Next commenter is Rita Loof.
Good morning, Rita Loof, Director of Environmental Affairs for RATIC International. We submitted written comments back in April, and I'm not sure our issues made it into the presentation today, so I'll reiterate them now. We've been urging the district to recognize the efforts of facilities who have voluntarily reduced their emissions. There should be an exemption for companies that have invested in clean technology early on. The baseline calculation may penalize operators who have been good environmental stewards. Presumably, the emissions from facilities that have implemented clean technology will be lower than those who have not done so. During the public consultation meeting, permit holders expressed concern that they may have been advised by district staff to participate in the Title V program. And specifically, one commenter stated that the emissions from his facility were well below the Title V threshold, but that permit engineers had encouraged the facility to stay in the Title V program. Since proposed Rule 317.1 specifically targets Title V facilities, it is now even more important for facilities to know how they can avoid applicability. Currently, there is no clear procedure on how facilities can petition the district if they want to get out of the Title V program. So we are urging the district to explain that process in the staff report. In previous meetings, Mr. Aspel responded that these were business decisions, but at the time, businesses had no idea that the district was going to impose these fees. So, and we also think it's problematic to collect fees now and then make the commitment on how to spend those funds later. We know that stationary sources get all the sticks and none of the carrots, and we certainly have no certainty here that stationary sources will get any of the incentive funding. As Mr. Rothbart mentioned, we are not the problem. Even if 100% of the stationary sources were to shut down in the district, we would still not achieve the standard. So we think this is really unfair to penalize the stationary sources for the sins of other technologies and other processes that are emitting, that are the source of emissions. And we hope the district can find some way to accommodate this. There are ways to offer flexibility. We understand the predicament, but really the people that went above and beyond and already achieved emission reductions should be recognized. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita.
Our next commenter is Bill Lamar.
Yes, good morning. I'm Bill Lamar, Executive Director of the California Alliance of Small Business Associations. We have members that will be compelled to pay Section 185 fees despite the fact that they are legally operating within their permit limits. One of the paradoxes of 185 is that it applies to major sources in severe and extreme areas. Yet in our South Coast Basin, a major source is one that emits only 10 tons of NOx and VOC per year, not 100 tons as in other parts of the country. And a 10-ton emitter can be a small business and not a big utility, refinery, or aerospace company. Mandating that these small emitters pay $12,000 a ton for emissions in excess of 80% of their baseline is ludicrous, when most of the pollution leading to non-attainment is caused by under-controlled mobile and federal sources. They should be paying these fees, not us. Nearly 15 years ago, the then governing board recognized this inequity and sent a delegation to Washington to speak to Congress and the White House. I was part of that delegation, and after discussions with Senators Boxer, Feinstein, Congressman Calvert, Waxman, and others, they too understood the injustice of implementing Section 185. In fact, it was Henry Waxman, co-author of the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments, said that it was never the intent of Congress to penalize stationary sources when mobile and federal sources are the reason for non-attainment. I urge this committee to recommend to the full governing board to follow the example of that earlier board and form a delegation of stakeholders to formulate and recommend a more feasible legislative pathway to attainment rather than just burdening businesses with more and more fees. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for your comments.
Our last commenter in the Zoom queue is Jane Williams.
Good afternoon, board members. This is Jane Williams. I'm the Executive Director of California Communities Against Toxics. I want to say that we support the rule. We understand some of the issues that are being brought up by industry and the public sector. It is interesting to think about how these two rules are before you actually dovetail together and take a look at the incentive packages that are in the IRA and Build Back Better. And I think it is a change. We are in a fundamental change in the way we use and produce energy in this country and in the ways in which we think about our industrial processes and how those industrial processes impact public health. But in the final estimation of it all, it is the board's duty to look at public health and the impacts of air pollution on public health. And by any measure, the South Coast Basin is one of the most, if not in different times, the most impacted basin in the entire country. And so I urge the board to maybe start thinking and staff to start thinking about how these incentive packages that we put into IRA and Build Back Better and these new technologies that some are off the shelf now, some are going to be off the shelf like in the next year or two, such as virtual power plants for large industrial boilers, and move forward with the fees and think about how we can augment some of the federal incentives with fees to actually get the technological change that we need on the ground to reduce pollution from stationary sources. So I thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you for your comments. That's the end of public comment on this particular item. Staff, you want to comment on any of the issues brought up?
Chair, I will identify Rita Louf's comment about facilities exiting rule applicability. In the draft staff report, this process was explicitly spelled out on how low emitting facilities who have already put in the efforts to lower their emissions can become exempt from this and file an exemption plan that staff can review and approve.
Very good.
And if I could add, so just a reminder again that the Clean Air Act is very prescriptive in a lot of ways, and this, or as commented, our hands are tied in a lot of these areas of flexibility that some of the commenters had raised. And while we, again, we empathize and understand the concerns that are raised. The best tool we have at this point then would be to kind of implement that in accordance with the act, and then we can all talk about what to do with the funds.
Understand. Thank you. I'm still disturbed by this rule because it penalizes stationary sources for mobile sources not meeting their requirement. And that's really bass backwards if you think about it. This mobile sources ought to be paying a penalty. And that's what this fee is. It's not a fee, it's a fine, it's a penalty. So, I understand we have to do something in accordance with the law, but it's exacerbating, and I sort of agree with Bill that if there's anything that we can do legislatively, I know we're talking to various people right now, but this is certainly part of the act that is not the intent of Congress. Committee members, any other comments? Go ahead, Vice Chair Cacciati.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Larry, just add this issue, as Mr. Lamar said, to our next trip to Washington, D.C. Add that to our list. Thank you.
It's on the list. Any other comments, questions? If not, this is a receive and file, and we'll go on to our next item, which is update on proposed amended rule 1148.1. And this will be presented by Michael Morris, our planning and rules manager.
Good morning, Chair McCallum and committee members. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for background, as far as Rule 1148.1, this rule regulates wellheads and well sellers. The primary objective of the rules right now is to address VOC emissions and odor mitigation. The rule impacts about 80 different companies, over 330 sites. Mainly their operations in the beach cities, but these wellheads and well sellers are scattered throughout the South Coast Basin. Next slide, please. So we're bringing the amendment forward at request of our two AB 617 communities, Wilmington, Wilmington, Carson, and West Long Beach, as well as South Los Angeles, who do have these types of operations in their areas. And they're looking for enhanced notification, which we developed as part of our earlier Rule 1148.2. But in this rule, we'll be addressing their objectives for additional monitoring and leak detection, as well as looking at lower emission technologies or zero emission technologies, odorants, and next slide, please. So part of the rule amendments, the key elements of that is to include a optical gas imaging required monthly to better detect leaks. This infrared technology will allow the users to more quickly find these leaks in areas where they normally wouldn't be able to find them, and address those leaks and eliminate those leaks by fixing them on a more timely basis. We're also requiring the use of Tier 4 final diesel engines for workover rigs. Workover rigs are maintenance activities that happen a couple days a year. And we did explore electrification of those equipment, but because they only operate a couple days a year, it's quite expensive to electrify considering the high levels of power. So it turned out to not be cost effective. However, that's not the end for possible electrification of those units. There is a California Air Resources Board clean fleet regulation that will eventually require those units to be electrified. That's the main combustion aspect for these types of facilities, but there are some small miscellaneous equipment that are utilized. And so we are including NOx limits and periodic testing for those equipment. And then lastly, we are looking at proposing to ban odorants that are used for masking odors. And if I could point out the picture on the bottom right of this slide, that is how the odorants are utilized. Basically, they're misted into the air to overwhelm an odor that would be occurring from some type of operation at the site. The oil, as they might expose it to the atmosphere, could contain bacteria and other odor-causing materials. And so the odorants basically act to mask it as opposed to control it. And the community was very upset about that, and we're proposing to ban that. And I give that as context for this next slide.
Are the odorants producing VOCs?
Yes, they are, and they also may contain toxics as well. So we were proposing to ban these, and the community came back to us and said that they were worried that we were carving out the provision that would allow neutralizers to be used in place of that. Now, neutralizers are slightly different in that rather than being sprayed into the air, they're generally in liquid form that is poured into the area that's going to contain the odors. They encapsulate the material, and that's what blocks the odors. They're not creating a different odor. However, our stakeholders were concerned that someone might, because of the way the definition works, misuse these and basically, change the name from odorant to neutralizer. And we heard those comments and thought that they were excellent comments. So to address that, we are not allowing the atomization of these neutralizers. We're also prohibiting any 1401 compounds to be in those neutralizers as well. So that should address both the toxics concerns that they have as well as misusing those types of materials. The common neutralizer that's used right now is a household soap. It also happens to be one of our clean air solvents. And it doesn't contain any air toxics. It's also, as some of our stakeholders were concerned about, it doesn't contain any endocrine disruptors. Next slide, please. So another area where there was some concern was the request that when there was a leak detected through this process, that the community be notified. And so we are including in this provision a notification requirement that leaks over 25,000 parts per million would be required to have a notification. That notification will go out to our stakeholders who have signed up through our 1148.2 portal, and that we would, as part of this effort, do outreach so that people were aware of this opportunity. Next slide, please. We did, of course, look at the costs for these provisions. And here you'll see on this table, the cost effectiveness as well as the emission reductions and annual cost associated with it. The main VOC reduction technology is this enhanced leak detection with the optical gas imaging, where the main NOx reduction comes from this requirement to have Tier 4 final workover rigs instead of the older equipment. Next slide, please. As far as the socioeconomic assessment, of course, that will come 30 days before the rule will be heard. But preliminarily, we're seeing that the cost of the rule will be roughly $4 to $4.5 million annually, and that that's associated with approximately 27 jobs forgone annually. As far as our California Environmental Quality Act assessment, we looked at the the activities associated with this rule, and we're not expecting any type of environmental impact. Therefore, a notice of exemption will be sent out. We're planning on bringing this rule to public hearing in August, and that concludes my presentation. I'm available for comments.
Thank you very much, Michael. Any comments, questions from committee members? Seeing none, we'll ask for public comment. Is there any public comment on this particular item?
Yes, we do have public comment. We don't have any comments in the auditorium. Our first commenter in the Zoom queue is Mark Abramowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This is Mark Abramos with Community Environmental Services, and I've been participating in the working group meetings on this rule since it began. There's been quite a bit of interest on the part of the public. I want to focus in on the workover rigs and my concern that the assumptions and the cost effectiveness analysis by staff are inappropriate. Staff uses numbers based upon, I'll call it a Rolls-Royce approach to electrification, when in fact there are other types of models that can be used. For example, fuel cells could actually be used in one of two ways. Fuel cells could directly provide power, either directly the fuel cell providing power to the rigs, or could provide the electricity needed to avoid some of the infrastructure concerns that the district has expressed some concern with. I will tell you that I've talked to at least one manufacturer that does produce fuel cells, that is extremely interested in the potential of being able to meet this particular market. And so it's important that the rule have some assumptions in there that are going to push people not toward Tier 4 engines, but towards zero emission technologies. In that way, you can let the market kind of decide what technology is going to be the one that's going to be used to bring zero emission technology to this source category. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Next commenter is Jane Williams.
Thank you. Again, Jane Williams, Executive Director of California Communities Against Toxics. I urge support for the rule, but I also want to say that 25 ppm notification level is a little bit high, especially given the fact that, it's 8 parts per billion is 9 parts per billion is our trigger threshold at refineries for corrective measures at the fence line, which is a federal standard. So we're measuring benzene risk in the low parts per billion, but our notification here is in 25,000 ppm. That seems very high to me. So anyways, I just want to bring that to the attention of the board and the staff. And thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you today about this rule. We've long been very concerned about emissions, given the fact that many of these wells are literally in people's yards, and we have these in schoolyards and right across the street from daycare centers. It's a very important rule to reduce the emissions of highly toxic compounds into neighborhoods and people's homes. So thank you.
Thank you, Jane, for your comments. That concludes public comment on this particular item. Would staff like to respond to the comments brought up?
Certainly, thank you. So with respect to fuel cells or other zero emission technologies, it was a goal to try and get there from the very beginning of this rule development. We weren't able to find cost-effective technologies that are readily available. Perhaps in the future, fuel cells or other technologies would be available. That probably would be about the same time frame as what we would see for the Clean Fleets regulation. But certainly if that became available, we would welcome taking another look at it. And then as far as the leak threshold, I think there's a little bit of a difference in where you're taking a look at that particular leak. At the fence line, that's a great distance away from where the leak actually occurs. So our threshold is where the leak actually occurs, 25,000, as opposed to where the fence line, where it will be greatly diluted, something closer to those numbers that Dr. Williams was speaking about.
Thank you. Comments from the committee? Everybody keeps walking by. They don't want to talk to us, Salachi?
Exactly, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. We'll move
Larry,
on.
I have to step out
Sure.
at noon, just so you know.
Okay. We'll go on then to, we have 3 written reports. Is there any need to review those items by committee members? Seeing none, we'll go on to any other business we need to talk about? Seeing none, public comment period. Anyone wish to speak to the committee on items not on the agenda but under the purview of the committee, please raise your hand.
Chair, our first commenter for general public comment is Rita Loof.
Rita, go ahead.
Yes, Rita Loof, Director of Environmental Affairs for RATIC International. And full disclosure, I am a refugee from Cuba, so I am very tech challenged. And my comments are regarding the website. Currently, it's a little bit difficult to find the section for proposed rules where the staff reports are. So it would be great if a link could be added to the calendar section whenever rules are before the Stationary Source Committee, so that the public can easily find the staff report to the rules. And speaking of the website, in the past, we've suggested, and we continue to suggest, that resources and links to resources outside regulatory agencies be added. I think there's some right now, but it would be great to have a link to organizations like ours that can assist businesses, as many times businesses are loath to reach out to the district, but they're more comfortable reaching out to a trade association. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rita, for your comments. That ends the public comment part of our agenda. Our next meeting will be February 21st at 10:30 a.m. Thank you all for participating.
February.
And this meeting is adjourned. June 21st. Have a great weekend, Jose, wherever you're at.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bye, everyone.
Bye.